Top Nation. I'm very excited to have my guest, Ron Greenberg, the CEO of GROWBILIZE and former C-suite CMO for a few multinational companies, with me on the show. You'll learn more about Ron as we go through this podcast, so please enjoy.
Thank you, Corey. It's good to be with you and to everyone watching and listening.
Yeah. So after hearing that bio, tell us a bit about, what are you doing now? And, we hear a bit of the bio and founder story, but where did this passion for the marketing and sales environment come from? And what has that brought you to now?
Yeah, well, the passion part, I started actually in a different field. I always imagined I was going to be a director, whether film or TV, I wasn't sure. And, I just found that it's a very difficult path. And I found like I wasn't using part of my brain, to fully in that endeavor as I was starting out. So I investigated different careers, and I found advertising at the time to be, a great mix of like the business side and analytics and the creative side. So I went back to graduate school and came out and started at one of the largest agencies in New York City at the time. And that's where I learned everything I still use about marketing. I was fortunate to work on some great accounts early on in my career, including Procter & Gamble, which was always known, like when you were, an assistant account executive, as like the best training environment to be in. Yeah. And sure enough, there are things that were ingrained in me in those early days, fresh out of grad school, that I use to this day, and things that I can, and the notion of just getting it done for your client, and sort of whatever it takes, within reason and within
there's foundational principles.
Yeah, I mean, all those things were
test of time.
Yeah, just putting in the effort and making sure that you were doing an excellent job. And things were scrutinized like crazy in those days. And they had training programs in the agencies and business writing classes that we, in addition to our regular jobs that we all attended. And I carry those with me to this day, including the analysis that we were expected to do of what the competitive dynamics were, positioning, research on our customers, all those things that were available. We, as assistant account executives, as the lowest on the totem pole, were expected to grind it out and produce these reports, and they had to be like absolutely pristine. And it was excellent. It wasn't so much fun when I was going through it, I'll admit, but it was excellent training. And I use many of those skills all these years later. Well, and I'm glad I went through it. It was a privilege, I realize.
And it's interesting now, you're actually teaching those students who, when your first role came out of grad school, you're now teaching the next generation of people who are starting their careers, where you were at, and setting that foundation. So, that kind of legacy and coming full circle is pretty cool. But what else are you doing?
At the end of that list that you're talking about in my bio, what I didn't add, and as you know, is that I'm now an adjunct instructor at New Jersey Institute of Technology. So I am teaching international business and leadership skills. And I do that as a way of giving back as well, because I think I have experience that may be valuable to these students, as you're suggesting.
Well, and we talked about this in our pre-call. There's a credibility because you've been out there and did it. You have traveled the world and did it at a high level. And, I think for any of us who've went through higher education, the things we tend to remember from our school years are those speakers and experiences where they were able to bridge kind of the knowledge and academic level stuff with the practical real world experience, and hearing the stories of in the field and in the trenches is what resonates, I think, with the students more than anything, and gives the instructors an added credibility bump. You know, they already, by nature of their position, have earned that right, but there's an added level of credibility bump and memorability, I think, to those that have it. So, you know, your students are obviously blessed to have you with that background.
Yeah, well, thank you. The feedback I have gotten, and I'm only one semester into it, so I'm brand new at this. But for my first, it was a group of 2 classes of MBA students, and that's what they told me, is they liked hearing the stories. It's like, you know, they wanted more stories about what the actual experience was. So on all these different elements, you know, as we go through each of the chapters, you know, whether it's national differences or culture or foreign exchange or the international monetary environment, all these things, marketing, of course, but all these different aspects, they're story to tell because I lived it, as you say.
Absolutely. So you've had all these high level positions, and you've now transitioned to the entrepreneurship side of this and the consulting. Tell us a bit about your consulting business, you know, and the transition when you move from those executive positions to, you know, being on your own and independent, and why you made that move.
Yeah, it's quite, you know, it is still quite different for me because I spent my, 80% of my career in the corporate world, mostly in large corporations. And, you know, I had senior level marketing roles. I was fortunate to be able to do that. My last role as chief marketing officer for Avid, I went in and a lot of what I've done through the course of my career has been in transformation. So getting a company to move from wherever they are to wherever they need to be. And I felt that I completed that job, and I was actually looking to do the next thing. And I had my customers starting to call me up and ask me if I would help with this or come in and talk to them about that. And the next thing I knew, I was consulting. And, naturally I expected, to be a CMO at the next company. But this came up, and it sort of was an organic progression from what I had been doing. And I found that I enjoyed it. And I guess in the back of my mind, because I work with so many consultants throughout my career, I always felt like there was one part, just like as you say about some instructors, there's one part about consultants, which is, do you really understand, how your recommendations can or cannot be, adopted?
Right.
What it takes from budget or organizational structure. Like, do you get the reality of what this means to an organization? And I always felt like some of that was always missing because they hadn't done it. They hadn't run the organization. So I felt like I could bring that knowledge of both the strategic part and the implementation execution part in a realistic way to these companies that I started consulting for. And then, realizing after all these years, I had quite a large network. There were a lot of companies that had needs to hear what I had to say and how I could help them, both talking to other CMOs that I had known through the course of my career, as well as CEOs. And I found it interesting that the CEOs normally are the ones who will bring me in these days.
Yeah.
Because the CMOs have their heads down so much that the CEOs are saying, from my overview, or the CROs or the CSOs will say, from my sort of overarching perspective, we need to make some changes, and it's both helping the marketing side as well as the sales side.
Absolutely. And I love that you've been able to transition that enterprise level corporate to this almost what I love. This, you may or may not like this term of almost being a fractional CMO for all these companies. So your level of impact, you can go deep and wide with more companies, where you talked about the impact of the work for the clients and those they serve, and being able to do that and have that level of connection and connection to your clients, but also the impact. I know the gratification in that, because I've been in a position to go from corporate, into it. And I love that. You brought up something though, with the connection with the CEO, and it's how marketing, and we talked about this in the pre-call, their strategy and tactics.
Yeah.
I'm not going to plant the seed with what I said there, but we talked about there's an order in strategy and tactics, and talk to that and why, and answer the question of why.
Yeah. I can't tell you the number of times I've been asked, are you strategic or are you tactical? And my answer always is, if you're a good marketer, you have to do both. Unless you have like a very specific strategy role, and you have that luxury in a large organization. But I've never felt like, as a leader of large organizations of 800, 1,000 people around the world, or even I had 800 people in Asia Pacific when I was head of marketing for IBM there. But the idea of setting a strategy and then not being as concerned about the execution is kind of silly. You have to figure out, now that you've put essentially the anchor in place, like the guidelines.
The true north.
The strategy gives you the ability to decide what to do and what not to do.
Yeah.
So, and that's often as important, because in the normal course of business, day to day, marketing is getting requests from everywhere.
Well,
and very easy to wind up being in just complete react mode 100% of the time, unless you have this guiding strategy that says, this is not going to move the ball forward. And the strategy, by the way, has got to be connected to business results. It's got to be connected to delivering profitable revenue or revenue growth. And, so there's a whole discussion there, but
absolutely. And it's the focus and direction at the strategic objective level. And then you move into the key results and the outcomes. So if we think of companies like Google use the OKR framework, the strategic objectives, and then the operational layer that has the tactics, with the key results and making it measurable, and that, but you need that focus and direction that the big rocks, so to speak, and the strategic objectives
are. And the thing is, this again goes back to my early days, which is, we'd write these creative briefs or these key benefit documents, and you would evaluate the campaigns or, an advertisement, whether it was on strategy or not. And so you had the strategy in front of you. Now, this is on a smaller scale, but you had that, and it drove the focus into who's the target audience, what motivates them, what is valuable, what benefit are you delivering, how do you support that? And then you'd have something to look at all of the work. So it's not just I like it or I don't. It's is this on strategy or not? So then, years later, and expanded multiple times, it's still the thought process that I go through, which is to say, is this on strategy or not? And then here are the changes, does it down to the level of, what are you saying? What's the tonality of the message? What does it look like? Is this right for the customer? Is this the right level? Is this right for the situation that you're discussing? Too often when, these days, especially when we have all these analytics available, we're looking at the numbers, but not at the actual content, the delivery of the message and what the message is saying. So you could never get away from that,
Well,
because that's the
and I would add,
conversation and the
even the
engagement.
medium that you choose and
Yeah.
how that shapes the message. So there's the content in a message, then
Right.
there's all the things like the medium, the tone,
Yeah.
the non-tangible things.
Yeah. And the medium should be driven by who the buyer is and what, how they seek information and what's valuable to them and what's valuable to them in the form of the message too. So all those things are important to know today in order to be effective. So, when I get asked questions like, what's your social media strategy in general? It's like, I don't have one in general. I have one in specific for, for a persona or for an issue or for a solution, so it's got to be part of the mix. Yeah,
absolutely. And I love that. You've used the word value a bunch of times. Let's dive in on this. And we had a call and some emails here with a potential client, a tech firm, in regards to helping, at that strategic level, and some of those pieces that need to be done up front correctly are those things like the value proposition and that value positioning and your go-to-market strategy even. Can you talk about some of those foundational things about value and positioning and why that's important and a critical part of strategy? Or if it's not, debunk it, but.
No, it definitely is. I think the key part of that, of value, is understanding value from the customer's perspective, not from the, it's outside in, not inside out.
Yeah.
So too often, and I see this every single day, to this, as recently as this morning, value is too often, it's not really value. It's companies asserting or describing what they do. And it may or may not match what the customer needs. But the way to deliver value is really starting with those insights and research and conversations and interviews, however you're gathering those insights, is understanding what the customer is facing and how what your company does can help solve a problem, and even at a personal level, make their lives easier. So it's both the professional connection as well as the personal connection that you're trying to make. And that's what branding is. It's making that emotional connection. But if you don't understand what the customer needs and what they're thinking about and the pressures they're under and how you're going to solve the problem and how it's going to change their lives or their organization and their performance, then you're really missing the boat. So you need to understand that. And it's not an easy process. It sounds easy, and everyone gives it, everyone talks about value. But going through that painstaking process it takes experience and it takes a lot of discipline to get through it. But once you've got it, then this is what we're talking about, strategy. It's tied into strategy. It gives you the guidelines for then to execute effectively.
Absolutely. And one thing I was saying about, and anyone that knows me, they know I'm not a patient guy. I'm high energy, kind of moving the needle. But one thing I've found in the past is I'll rush the process sometimes. And with marketing, you have to get certain foundational things done right up front before you push forward. And I think, there's been tension in the past, between sales and marketing. And a lot of times the two are actually in different silos within an organization. Yeah. But I know you are an advocate that they're really interlinked. It's very circular, and one helps feed the other in terms of feedback and a driver. Can you talk about kind of the sales marketing gap in organizations and the importance of your philosophy and approach to marketing and sales alignment, because that's really a specialty and a message that you have, that you're able to bridge that and get profitable revenue, right? There's one thing about getting numbers, attention, and all of this stuff.
Right.
But at the end of the day, companies not just survive, but thrive based off of profitable revenue. So that sales marketing alignment piece, I'd love to hear. I want you to share your philosophy and experience and thoughts on this, because you're the guru on this one.
Okay. I'll tell a little story first about it. And, when it really occurred to me of, the importance of sales and marketing alignment, it was when I was in Asia and I was CMO of IBM Asia Pacific. So I had the responsibility for marketing over 14 Asia Pacific countries. It was, Australia, New Zealand, India, Southeast Asia, Korea, China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Japan. I lived in Tokyo. And so this was at the time where it was the Thai currency, the Thai baht crashed, and it rippled throughout the region. So especially in Southeast Asia, there were, serious issues about, banks going under and people's paychecks and things like this. And so I was working with each of the general managers who were essentially sales leaders in each of those countries, and also there were regional ones. And I just remember I was trying to implement, a new corporate campaign, and they were coming back to me and saying, we're going through like complete societal upheaval at the moment. We can't do this.
This is crisis on a new level.
Right. So, coming from the US and headquarters and then going into this, and then everyone was like, we'd never seen anything. And before that, and thankfully now again, Asia was the Asia tiger. So, things were just booming, and now things were just crashing. So I had to understand, first of all, what those priorities were, what the salespeople were facing, and then coming out of it, working with them to figure out what are the plans we need to put in place to get the revenue running again. And there was no way I could do that in a silo. I mean, it would have been foolish. I guess I could have, but I got out there and I went out, to those countries with the sales leaders, to the customers, to really understand, in addition to the great research that we were conducting, but also the personal connection at a, field level to understand what was going on and what the sales team was facing. And again, talk about things that affect you for the rest of your career. This was one of those experiences where it wasn't just like demand gen and we're trying to generate tons of leads. It was based on the revenue numbers that they're trying to hit, their quota numbers. How does that break down? What's the composition of that revenue? And then what can marketing do to help them achieve, whether it's X number of, enterprise accounts, new accounts, or growing existing accounts by X percent, or this amount of growth in small and medium business, or growth in this industry. And then we designed our marketing based on understanding how we could contribute and to the revenue, and how we can move leads through the pipeline and close business. So that to me is something that I've done. In fact, after almost, having shouting matches on the phone or in person with some of those sales leaders, they're some of my closest friends to this day, all these years later, because we went through that together in the trenches.
You know what? And something to be said for going through adversity together to really build that cohesiveness. It's different than going through success.
Yeah.
There's something bonding. And, one of our previous guests on the show was Joe DeSena, the CEO for Spartan Race. And he loves the idea. Literally, he developed a business around putting people through obstacles and what he calls forced adversity to build up our characters as well as, as a team. And as someone who's done this with teams of people who had very loose connection before, we have this permanent bond by going through those challenges and adversities and then getting to the other side. I think that's the big thing, is doing it together and getting to the other side.
Yeah, no, definitely. And that I know, because we went through that together and we succeeded. And, we came out of that crash into rapid, profitable growth. And Asia Pacific turned out to be the star region for IBM at that time. We bonded and we became, tight friends. It's interesting. There's a group of us that text each other still, even though we're spread out all over the country and the world, but we stay very close together. I'm the only marketing guy in that mix. The rest of them, are all sales leaders or now, CEOs or, former CEOs. So it's a great group.
That's
and I
awesome.
learned a lot from them by listening to them and getting out there. And it's like that, standing in their shoes idea of understanding the pressure that they're under. And I've done that as a consultant too. More recently, I work with maybe the world's largest cloud company. And they had an issue of not that they were not growing, but they were not growing fast enough in one region of the world. So they asked me to go in and take a look. And it started really as a marketing project. But what I found out quickly enough, because I didn't want to just go, and of course I talked to everyone in marketing, but I spent as much or probably more time with the sales team and started interviewing them and finding out.
And the sales team's boots on the ground.
Yeah.
They have direct insight on the customers that, the data and analysis team can't get, or marketing doesn't, other than through surveys and stuff like that. Typically the marketing teams, almost an inside role, right? That's,
it shouldn't be, but it often is.
Yeah. And that's where I love that story up front, where, you went around and toured those clients and gave them this experience that the salespeople said they would have never been able to get access to these people and have the level of relationship that they had because of what you're able to do through some of those unique marketing things you're able to do that gave them an experience that they then attracted in salespeople, B2B salespeople, that get called in by CEOs or CROs.
Yeah. So there are two things on that. One is on this one project, working with the sales team to find out, as you're saying, they were in front of the customer, they were getting asked questions that they didn't feel like they were prepared to answer, and they needed marketing's help. So that was one part of it. So they're getting challenged, and they needed the presentations and the insight and the responses, and they could do some of it on their own, but the marketing team is the team that is supposed to be able to craft all that stuff and give them polished answers for all of that. The second part was they recognize also that there are opportunities to grow even within their largest account. Now, in this region, their largest account also happened to be the largest account for this company in the world. So they recognize, we're doing great in this client, but we're in one part of it. So if we can get into the other parts, and it's this huge company.
Well, and to solve solutions versus sell stuff.
Well, if they
that's
can get
that
in,
outside in, right?
Well, they had the success, yeah. So if they can get into these other parts, think of the upside for revenue. But they needed this is we're account focused sales and marketing. I don't like really the term account-based marketing because it's a misnomer. It's sales and marketing. And that's where that came in. So I help with that as well, as to help penetrate into the other parts of this account that they were already in, but not reaping the benefits in the other divisions.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking on the fly here from an organizational design perspective, because there needs to be a change in the organizational design of marketing and sales. I think, in a lot of organizations, because they are siloed, there needs to be a change in the actual design of the organization to be more effective if they're currently siloed. And I'm thinking at that account level, you have typically field reps with an inside sales rep attached, in a B2B sales model. I'm wondering if there's an equivalent to the account executive that has the marketing hat that's helping with the relational building, but with that different mindset and ability in the discovery phases of the sales process, as well as the insights that marketing's so good at around the competitive positioning and benchmarking, and that really helps support sales. But rather than being this driver on the outside to try and bring things in, or just pulling pieces, being part of the actual sales process and part of that outside in team that's dealing with the solving business needs and issues versus selling more things, be it products or services and share of wallet, because that's an inside out approach. And you've already used that outside in and that client centric approach. What do you think on kind of reframing how the org design is to have them being kind of a collaborative and cohesive team, and having it kind of an equivalent role, with some sort of solutions marketing person with an account rep that holds the relationship and kind of manages the sales process piece?
Yeah, I think the organizational piece is challenging. What I found over my career, in just the situation that you're describing, is at IBM we were trying to deliver industry value. So this came from the recognition that IBM had sales reps for software, hardware, services, industries, and all going to the same large customers. And the customers were saying, we can't sort this out. You guys are all coming in pitching us different things. So we had to figure out, how do we bring it all together and go in with an industry lens, which is we understand, automotive, or we understand financial services, and here are the insights that we have, and here's our understanding of what you, the customer, and this is at the C level we're talking, this is what we understand you're facing. And what that did by starting, and we got the sales and the marketing teams together, and I actually led the effort. And we had everyone in a room, and we went through these planning sessions and very specific. Here's what we need to be able to deliver, whether it's the sales enablement materials or the solutions content or the marketing materials, whatever it is. Let's go through the checklist, and together we'll figure out how do we create a seamless discussion with our clients. So it's something that we came out of very successfully because we did do it together. So we didn't change the organization so much. There were organizational changes that resulted from that, but it was from unifying our view of how to go to market with customers, and it turned out. The customers, of course, appreciated it, but the results from the sales side were significant. So, it really worked. And, I think that, you referred to the Avid situation where we were selling products, but not necessarily selling solutions. So we had to redefine.
Sorry, Ron.
Yeah.
I have someone. All right.
Okay.
Sorry, Hop Nation podcast. As we're recording this, the beginning of February 2021, we're still in COVID mode, and many of us working from home. So when you hear the noises in the background, you'll appreciate this for all of you who are in the same situation. Bringing it back to the podcast as we're starting to wind up here, Ron. Tell me, what are 2 or 3 foundational marketing principles or philosophies that have stood the test of time and will moving forward? And then what are maybe 2 or 3 trends or, emerging ideas that you see moving forward, especially in light of how the world of business and business to business sales and marketing's changed as a result of COVID, now that we brought that up?
Yeah. No, these are great questions. And I will go back to my early days. It's interesting, the revelations that I'm hearing now about customer centricity, even from sophisticated large companies that are like expounding on customer centricity, and also, when it comes to things like demand generation, that it's quality over quantity. This is like the 3rd time in my career I've gone through these revelations. So to me, it's like the focus, if you've always been customer focused and value focused and thought about it from a customer perspective, these will not be revelations to you. They will be guiding lights for you throughout your career.
Foundational, stand the test of time principles.
Absolutely. I go back to what Peter Drucker said about marketing, which is, if marketing, and this was the sort of idealistic definition, and I'm widely paraphrasing. If marketing is doing its job well, if they understand the customer well enough and delivering to the customer what they really need based on the understanding that they've gained from engaging with the customer, then there's really no need for sales to do much at all. Now, of course, now, of course, we haven't reached that, but that was the ideal. And I really take that to heart, that's what I should be striving for, is to get the customer as close to purchase as possible by doing all the things that are available to us to show our understanding, to deliver value, and to describe what that value is on their terms. So those are guiding principles that I use.
And making it easy to do business and
absolutely
buy from you. I think if that happens, then literally you're showing up and just facilitating the movement of, fulfilling the client's needs. So I love that.
Which leads me to the second part of your question, which is, and Gartner has been talking about this lately too, with their sales vision to 2021. About helping, not selling, but helping buyers buy. So it's exactly what you just said. It's helping your customer, helping them understand. And now, because there's so many choices and there's so much information, and this goes back to like advocacy and partnership and really understanding, again, from your customer's perspective, what it is they're trying to accomplish, and helping them achieve that outcome. So, I believe in that as well. And, we use techniques now like a customer journey roadmap. The journey maps are an important component in understanding of laying out, the different stages that customers go through. And we can do this now. We can do so much now because the data is available almost immediately. And that's also the second part of this answer, is the time has come now. There's really no excuse, for sales and marketing not to be aligned, because the tools are shared, the view of the customer and the data should be similar. And what's missing is the measurements are not always similar. The two teams are getting measured differently.
The KPIs in terms of how they're measured internally on performance. I agree. Yeah. And that's where the org design piece, I think, is a reshaping there.
Yeah.
And I've been talking about value first selling, but that's where marketing's good, because there's messaging. Like when there's so much information and knowledge, and a lot of consulting and sales was giving information and knowledge, there's an overabundance. In fact, we're at a oversaturation point where now there's, and consultants or people in the past didn't want to give information up front because that was the value of doing business and once you paid. But there's literally, you're having to give value in front of things to even get in the conversation. And, that's part of, I say it's part of marketing time and marketing expense, and and part of the process and the customer journey map. And that then opens up conversations because now you're building relationship and they get that feeling and experience that you talked about that's foundational, that was transformative,
right,
in those roles. And I think the idea of selling and the inside motivations and that just driving through activity approach is one, inefficient, ineffective, and people's bullshit sniffer is really good, I think, right now.
Yeah.
And in an age where there's an overabundance of information and knowledge to stand out, I love they have highlighted this, giving value in front and really, being customer centric, but at a very specific, relevant level too.
Yeah. Yeah. So my approach is, and again, this is a theme that we've been talking about, is making it very tangible and practicable. So we can put it into motion, we can measure it, we can deliver results, and having like very specific accounts to work on together. Mm-hmm. Is, rather than saying, we really should work together, or, let's have meetings every month and we'll talk about what's going on. You'll be doing that forever and nothing will ever change. But when you get together in a room and say, okay, we're going to pick 10 accounts and we're going to start mapping those accounts, who the decision makers are, and we're going to figure out the journeys that they're on. And marketing, you're going to figure out, what you have right now that you can use at each stage. And sales, you're going to say what you need to be able to present at each stage. And together we're going to come up with our seamless stream of content. And if we don't have it, we need to create it. If we have something like that, we need to modify it.
Well, and
if we have all this other stuff, we need to push it aside and only focus on this. We're all delivering the same message. We're all understand what needs to happen at each stage, and we're looking at the metrics together. We're sharing the measurements together. So, we're all unified around the same outcome. And that will drive organizational change. But more than that, it will drive cultural change, which is really what's required.
What drives performance.
Yeah.
And you can create a performance culture that people buy into. They aren't driven into it. They buy in, and they want to move towards. You create a movement almost.
Yeah. So all the age-old complaints, like marketing says sales doesn't use our content, and sales says your content isn't relevant, and sales also says the leads you're giving us we already know about, and they're not worthwhile, and marketing says, well, we're giving you all these good leads, you're not doing anything. That goes away because you're all looking at it in the same way and you're evaluating the same data. And again, the great thing is these strategies, so all the tools that are available, all the technology,
goes back to the point you made,
all the technology gets used better, in a better way. So whether it's intent data or predictive analytics or the CRM data or marketing automation, it all now comes together in, the purpose is to move this forward rather than just, these are the latest tools and we need to have them. Now you know what you're using the tools for.
Yeah, it's congruent and aligned.
Right.
And it's because, and this goes back to the comment up front, It's strategy first, tactics second.
Yeah.
Right? All the tools, tactics, the people, process, technology piece, is, moving in that focus and direction that's set by strategy. And it gives that focus and direction, but it also gives that culture that we talked about. So I love that we're kind of coming full circle and bringing that meaningful piece. And he gave some specific examples. Now, for you to be a top leader like you've been in that, there's certain personal success habits and principles you have. And I ask this of all my guests, what are 2 or 3 of your personal success habits to stay top of game?
Well, again, the theme is really understanding what's going on in the marketplace and from your customer's perspective. So staying on top of this, and this was something that was ingrained in us early on. That at advertising, at the time I joined, you were expected to go to museums and read books and listen to music and read the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times and just consume information, and not just business information, but the broader picture.
Yeah, the cultural piece. You've talked about culture, and we probably need to get on a panel discussion around just creating cultures for performance.
Yeah. So there's that. But I also believe in setting high bars for teams. And being very clear and transparent. So I've come into teams, and this is part of the transformation story too, where no one really understood, what they were trying to achieve as a marketing team. What was the marketing team? And these questions I always ask coming in, or even in the interview process, what's the expectation of the company for the marketing team? What do you expect the marketing? And I'll ask this first, a CEO who's looking to hire me. What do you expect the marketing team to deliver to your company? And there's not often a very well thought out, clear answer. Many times the answers are very solid. Sometimes they're not, and it forces the thought process.
Yeah.
But for me,
and if it's me, if I'm asked that question, because I have, and really, we don't know.
Yeah.
The CEO of a company will be like, that's why I'm coming to you. I need you to help guide me through the process.
Yeah. So we certainly will do that.
And we don't want to be vulnerable to say, I don't know what I don't know.
Right.
Right. Because there's something at a certain level of performance or position where we don't want to get exposed for our gaps and weaknesses. But holy cow.
But I would rather.
The more I find I have a hell of a lot to learn, and very senior leaders and the best leaders in the world, there is that humility and ability to engage in those gaps with experts, and then really drive into where they are strong.
Yeah. So I would say I'd rather have someone say, I don't know, rather than just make a story up. But as a marketing leader, I would say we need to define what it is. Yeah. And even if it hasn't been figured out, then that's the opportunity, is you need to figure it out. Like, here's what we're going to contribute to the business. And then make it known to everybody, make that part of the cadence of the business, how we're doing against these objectives. And then also as a coach, and I think as a leader, you have that responsibility too, to help your team achieve this, and to, get into segments of your own team and understand, what challenges they're facing, what is it they need from you, whether it's encouragement or, resources or budget or skills or whatever, or training or whatever it happens to be, but figure that out and provide it for them so they could succeed. And the last part, of course, is getting the best, attracting and keeping the best people you can find, smart people who are experts that, build out your ability. I never think that I know everything about all the different aspects of marketing. I know there are people who are excellent at it, And I want them to be part of my team and contribute and go crazy and do their jobs and be wildly successful, because we'll all be successful. And I also try to keep a sense of humor about it too. It's like, we should be having fun. Some of this stuff, marketing should be fun. I mean, look what we're doing. And, we should be having fun with our customers too. And, sometimes, especially when we're all looking at spreadsheets or, not spreadsheets, but, dashboards, we forget about that part. So we need to bring it alive and make it personal and, even through a screen, engage with each other and have a good time doing what we're doing.
Awesome. And I'm going to do a first with you on this podcast.
All right.
I told you beforehand in our prep what I normally ask is last question.
Yeah.
I'm giving you a different one because of the conversation we just had.
Okay.
What do you like to do for fun?
I like to do a lot of
let
things
us
for
know
fun.
a little about Ron Greenberg.
Okay.
This is a guy, not
All
with the marketing. What do you do for fun?
Well, it's funny. I used to put on my resume, I was an unpublished cartoonist. And I would get more than anything else on my resume. And I thought I had a pretty good resume. I had good experience. People would always ask me about that. And it's just like an indication that if you reveal a little bit about your personal interests, I like to draw and I like to paint. And,
I love it.
I'm a hack photographer, and I take pictures and then print out hardcover books all the time. So I like all of that. I like the arts, and I also like going to see other artists. And I actually, for my time in Japan, I collected Japanese woodblock prints of a certain era, more of like the modern era, like industrial scenes and city scenes and things like that. So there's that. During COVID, because my gym closed and eventually went out of business, I took up biking again. So riding up and down the Hudson River from downtown to the George Washington Bridge early in the morning before the paths get too crowded has been like a wonderful experience for me, to be out there like at sunrise and ride for an hour and a half round trip, and you get to see the regulars out there who are jogging or whatever. So, and along the river, it's like a great thing. And I'm big into music too, so I am omnivorous about all different types of music. And was fortunate that I got to work in the media industry for a little while and got to meet some of the artists themselves, some of my heroes. So I have a lot of interest.
Who was the one that just will stick with you, your favorite meeting of an artist?
Well, there are two, actually.
Okay.
One was I got to go to Alicia Keys ran a charity ball for AIDS relief for children in Africa. And I just thought she was just like unbelievable, like just was the MC, was the primary fundraiser, was a performer. And, there were so many stars who came to participate. And I was really lucky to be there.
I was thinking about that.
Yeah. And years later, I had the opportunity, because she was a user of our technology when I was at Avid Pro Tools. We did a customer event at her studio in Manhattan.
Wow.
So I got to go into her office and spend time with her. And then it was my job to introduce her. And she did a concert for us, just her sitting at the piano and singing New York, and all of her hits.
Oh, that's awesome.
And it was absolutely unbelievable. And she's just such a wonderful person. And it's great to see, like, when you see something, get to meet and chat with someone one-on-one like that, which was a thrill of my life. And she turns out to be just so like warm and approachable and real and talented, and she's amazing. The other person was Bootsy Collins, who was the bass player in James Brown's band, and was in Parliament and Funkadelic, so funk music, and now is an artist on his own. But he's also one of those guys like you never know. He's tall guy, always wears a top hat. Like one of the best bass players of all time, but also has his like charitable, giving, quiet, personable side. He's just really a good person, and it's a thrill to me.
That charitable piece and giving and impact work's a huge part of who you are, and I know it's a foundational part and grounding part for my life. So it's good to hear that from you.
Well, thank you. I learned from them and from other people, and I try to give back as much as I can.
Yeah, well, it's inspiring, and I love that ripple of impact. Like when we're inspired in that, and it inspires us to go out and do something, then it inspires others. There's this ripple of impact.
Yeah.
And I think if individuals and businesses can change the definition of ROI from return on investment to ripple of impact, I think they'll do it right more often. And
it's interesting. Yeah,
return on investment will actually come. So, on that, I think we'll call it a wrap. So thank you, Hop Nation. Thank you, Ron Greenberg, for joining us.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Corey.
Excellent. We'll talk soon.
All right. Be well. Stay safe.